Candle Night is a game that started off as very chill. Much like with other mediums, the games I play depends on what I'm in the mood for, whether it be wanting to take out some aggression in an explosive FPS, or just wanting to relax and lose myself into whatever I happen to be playing. In between what I described are loads of other moods that lead me to playing the games that I play. I like the mood it gave off because that eventually led to more. More specifically, the tone and setting, which I'll eventually get into. From the start, I like the system that's based on your candle and how strong its flame is. I'm pretty sure that the damage you both take and give depends on how brightly lit your flame is. It could be replenished by striking both enemies and candles that you'd stumble into. I like that this was done because it was a way of making Candle Night stand out from the many other platformers out there. You'll eventually see that this was handled in multiple different ways. You can categorize Candle Night into multiple different subgenres, but at the end of the day, it's a platformer. As a result of that, there's all sorts of platforming involved, whether it be with simple movement from point A to B to challenging yourself with side content. In particular, I like the sections where I had to avoid specific spots in the paintings. This involved jumping into a painting and playing as a miniature version of yourself. In some cases, this was mandatory and used to get you to different areas, but other times it was side content. Either way, I like this. Rather than just having to make my way through blocks or other items/visuals that have been used in countless other platformers, the use of the paintings made platforms different. Not only was it nice to have something new to look at, but sometimes it could be used to mislead. In all of the paintings, there's a main shape/line that works to guide you. That's eventually discovered as you overcome them, but from the start, it's easy to be confused because at the end of the day, you're looking at a painting. Besides the default walking, I liked how there were multiple ways to get around. You could eventually fast travel and find shortcuts within large areas, but what I was particularly fond of was the dash. I do, however, have to admit that it bummed me out to see that the dash leads with the sword, but it couldn't be used offensively. I felt that was a missed opportunity to open things up for the player and ultimately add more gameplay. Platformers can range from simple to intense, and when I mean intense, I mean something like the near rage quit custom Super Mario levels. Candle Night leaned more towards the former. There were some challenging platforming sections here and there, but nothing too difficult. What I did find difficult was trying to get around from area to area. Sometimes it was very intuitive and all I needed to do was move forward, but other times I'd end up completely lost going in circles. It also didn't help that there was a lot to explore in each area. That's a good thing, but when I realized that I was done with one area and that I needed to head to the next in order to advance, I'd have no idea what to do. On the bright side, Candle Night features a lot of scenic backgrounds. Even if I was lost and at times frustrated with that, there was still something to look forward to. Going from place to place was at times harder than I expected, but I was satisfied with the distance between checkpoints. Sometimes games can either make them too close to each other or too far away. Finding the sweet spot is key to offering a fair yet challenging experience. When you look at it, Candle Night may not look difficult, but there were moments where I found myself having to replay sections more often than I would have liked. It's mainly because combat wasn't as fluid as I would have liked. It makes sense, seeing as how you're playing as a fully armored knight, but at the same time, that made it so that going up against faster enemies was a challenge. The enemies had tells and some could straight up be ignored or even cheesed against. That's something I'll bring up later. The creme de la creme of Candle Night is with its visuals and design. The fact that you're a small figure in a large area make things even better. Being a small figure in a big world reminded me of Toy Story for Sega Genesis, PS1, and even though I didn't play it, Clockwork Knight. I already said that the backgrounds were great to look at, but you can say that for just about every aspect of this game. The knight's armor was especially sleek when seen up close. I realize some may not care about details like that, but I do. If I'm going to be staring at a screen for hours at a time, the least a game can do is try to be as visually appealing as it can be. I previously mentioned that Candle Night had a general relaxing feel to it. While that's mostly true, there were times where its tone was the kind of dark that you'd find in an old fairy tale. It also helped that Candle Night featured fantastical music. It seemed like the right kind of fit for an old fable or fantasy. There were instances of different music use, but it still managed to come well together. It seems like combat was a bit overlooked in Candle Night, but I still found it amusing and helpful to see that it was possible to damage the final boss outside of the fight. I discovered this when I noticed that it was possible to see part of the boss before actually engaging it. I tried firing fireballs at it, and when I saw that damage was being dealt, I repeated that for as long as I was willing to put up with such a tedious task. In one instance, this led to going to the second phase of the boss fight right from the start, but in general, it really just whittled down the boss's health. I realize how cheap/cheesy this makes me seem, but I like to think that if I'm doing something that's already part of a game, it's simply another strategy. I wouldn't have resorted to this had I had an easier time with the final boss. There were times where I wouldn't even last a minute. After dealing with that more times than I can recall, I decided that the best thing to do was stock up on a lot of healing potions and try to tough it out. When that didn't work, I had to grind for better equipment. Grinding in a platformer seems out of place, but it wasn't too bad. It's kind of like in Soulsborne games. I found the checkpoint that was close to enemies that would give me a decent number of coins over and over again, so I did that for around an hour or so. Due to that, I was able to buy what I assume is the game's strongest sword. That, along with changing up my tactics, helped me eventually beat the final boss. What stood out to me was another way in which the boss fight was buggy. During one of my attempts at beating the boss, I was able to, but the boss fight automatically restarted. It was as if I hadn't beaten the boss at all. In the moment, that was a hassle to deal with, but seeing as how the game wasn't terribly buggy or straight up crashing, I'd say that this issue isn't that big of a deal. Despite having a lot to offer, Candle Knight is the kind of game that you beat and move on from. I don't see myself coming back to it at all because I'm satisfied with what I got out of playing it. There's more side content that I could complete, but I didn't enjoy Candle Knight to the point where I want more of it. The visuals are great to look at, the atmosphere of the overall game, and the different approach to certain platforming sections makes Candle Knight stand out. There were a handful of issues with it, such as occasionally getting lost and having to put up with clunky combat, but they're not bad enough to the point where I'd say don't play this game. I will, however, say that if you see it on sale and it appeals to you, give it a try. How do you feel about games that don't have maps and are difficult to navigate through? Is taking advantage of bugs in a game a form of cheating? How important are graphics and atmosphere when it comes to the games that you play? If you enjoyed this content, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and if you're up for it, become a patron. Thank you very much for watching.